That's a great reading. There's some great classic lines on there. Put on the Lord Jesus Christ. Well, our gospel reading today is Matthew, the 18th chapter. Jesus said to the disciples, if another member of the church sins against you, go and point out the fault when the two of you are alone. If a member listens to you, you have regained that one. But if you are not listened to, take one or two others along with you, so that every word may be confirmed by the evidence of two or three witnesses. If the member refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if the offender refuses to listen even to the church, let such a one be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. Truly, I tell you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Again, truly, I tell you, if two of you agree on earth about anything you ask, it will be done for you by my Father in heaven. For where two or three are gathered in my name, I am there among them. Now, before you take that slide down, Jolene, I'd appreciate if you'd look at that for a minute. Was there something in there that just didn't register, didn't make sense? Help us, God, as we seek to interpret what this means for our lives. Okay, so, my question to you today is, how are you doing? Simply, how are you doing? It's getting old, isn't it? No, things don't tend to wear me down, but this pandemic thing, it's September. It's starting to work on me. I mean, I have funerals and there's no hugging, no embracing. I mean, there are churches that are gathering together, Lutheran churches I know that are gathering, limited seating, no singing, no passing of the peace and able to say hello. Pews are empty. We need a breakthrough. And I read this week that, we have, I think, 3 vaccines in testing stages so far, and things seem to be moving along, and that's good news. We need that breakthrough, but in the sense of waiting for a breakthrough, we have to wait and hope. This gospel lesson today that I read is not about waiting and hope, especially if it has something to do with resolution or if it has to do with personal relationships with others. I mean, the advice that Jesus offers here in Matthew, I think, is a powerful witness for all of us. But there is a disclaimer. Jesus probably, actually most likely, didn't say any of this. Now, why would I say that? Did you pick anything up about that reading? Anything that might have jumped out at you? If you have an answer, is there a word in there that just jumped out at you and said, that doesn't seem right? You can unmute and say the word. Who has the word? Anybody? Nobody? Going once? Going twice? The word church. The church, or an organizational structure of any kind, did not exist until decades after Jesus died. Matthew is the only gospel to use the word church. It's not found in Mark, it's not found in Luke, it's not found in John, only Matthew, and only like 2 times. And so the best of scholarship and consensus on that is that Matthew, as putting together this gospel, took his understanding, his faith in Jesus, the teachings of Jesus, and crafted this story to meet a need in his early Christian community. What's interesting is this story is only in the Gospel of Matthew. It is not in any of the other Gospels, only in Matthew. And so scholars say there must have been fighting and arguments in the church of Matthew, and they took the teaching love your neighbor as you love yourself, or love one another as I have loved you. They took that teaching and they put words to it and a story to it to say, this is how we deal with arguments and fights in our church. You know what we call that today? We call it reconciliation. How do you reconcile with somebody? And I find it helpful, and I find it truthful, and I find it Christ-like that Matthew crafted this story. It captures the essence of Jesus' teaching. Now, I wish I could show you, on PowerPoint, because this is the beauty and the majesty and the art of Matthew. Because it is the only gospel with a story, but he frames it. He has a bookend, the story above it and the story below after it are stories that are in the other gospels. Context matters. I think Matthew says something very important, not only in this passage, but where he places this passage in between these two stories. The story that comes right before it, you know it, you've heard it. The shepherd who leaves the one sheep. He leaves to find the one lost sheep, and he leaves the 99 behind. I mean, there is no shepherd in their right mind that would do that, too big of a risk. But it speaks to Jesus' importance of that one individual, that one person. The other one that follows our reading is Peter saying, Jesus, how many times must I forgive? And Jesus says 7 times 70. 7 times 70. No person in their right mind would forgive 7 times 70. But it speaks to Jesus' importance on forgiveness. So you have 2 powerful teachings. The lost person, the lost sheep, and the importance of forgiveness. And in between, you have our gospel lesson. So keep that in mind for a second. Because on the surface, what do I take away from this? Gospel reading? Well, if you're having problems in your relationships, show initiative. Show initiative. Do something about it. That's some good advice. I mean, Jesus also teaches, seek and you shall find, knock and the door will be open. Those are initiative things too, that, things that we can do. But when we have troubled relationships, we can wait. Maybe that person will come and admit that they're sorry. Or maybe my pride has been hurt and I'm not about to go address the issue with that person. And then the idea of taking other people with you is so foreign to our culture. So foreign. I mean, I learned my lesson as a hard way as a pastor. I absolutely positively no way will address a problem with a member of the church by myself any longer. I take 2 or 3. And the reason for that is not because they're on my side, but because maybe I'm not hearing things properly. Maybe they can mediate, but also maybe they can help the person I'm meeting with see a different way. So for me, these verses on reconciliation speak volumes for church relations, but they speak volumes for my relationships with anybody. I mean, in the old days, didn't happen that way. Church fights, you left and you planted a new church. You started a new church. Why do you think you have so many Lutheran churches in town, right? 3. There were 3, now we're 2. Or the other thing that happens more today is instead of trying to reconcile a relationship, you just leave and you church shop and you go find another church. That's the hard work of reconciliation. And when we miss the hard work of reconciliation, we miss the beauty of a healed relationship. And we miss out on the skills that we have to dig within ourselves to work, listening skills and talking skills and empathy skills. We miss out on all that. We miss out on making community vibrant. I don't know if this is a piece of the puzzle of the estrangement of Democrats and Republicans in our world. I think it has something to do with it. It's hard work. It's easier to think, oh, we'll be the next group in power and we're just shoved down their throats exactly what we want. That's the exact opposite of what I hear in the gospel lesson today. Initiative. But the reading doesn't stop there. The reading continues with Jesus saying, you know, if you've tried everything and all hope is lost, treat them as a Gentile or a tax collector. We know how much the Jews didn't like the tax collectors because they were employed by Rome, and they definitely didn't like the Gentiles, or some of them didn't. So this is a real slap in the face. Treat them like a tax collector, treat them like a Gentile and just shun them. Why would Jesus say that? That is so out of character for him. I mean, in the Gospel of Matthew, if you remember, a few weeks back, I think it was the 13th chapter, Jesus was confronted with a Gentile woman who asked for healing, and he even called her a dog, which was the slang for a Gentile from the Jewish perspective. And yet she persisted, she changed his mind, and the whole Gospel of Matthew pivots. And Jesus realizes he's here not only for the Jews, but he's here for the Gentiles too. Matthew. Well, let's think about Zacchaeus. Remember Zacchaeus? That's in the Gospel of Luke, but that's Zacchaeus the tax collector. Come down. I want to eat at your house. And Matthew, do you know anything about Matthew? In the 10th chapter, the 3rd verse, Matthew is a tax collector. So instead, treating them like a Gentile and a tax collector might mean Jesus saying, treat them as I treat Gentiles and tax collectors, like lost sheep who deserve to be found and followed and risked for and need to possibly be forgiven 7 times 70. That's how you need to treat them. Treat them as human beings. Do not discard them. Keep trying and persisting. Show initiative because reconciliation is worth it. Now, I want to conclude with a difference between reconciliation and forgiveness. You can forgive someone who's dead. You can't reconcile with them. I mean, this is the hard work of reconciliation. It takes 2 people. And you have to realize you may not be reconciled because you're only 50% of the relationship. Forgiveness is your work, and it's alone work. And it doesn't need an apology to be effective. There's a big study by a guy by the name of Lewis Smedes. He's a psychologist, I think. He wrote, to forgive is to set a prisoner free and discover that prisoner was you. On the other hand, reconciliation is an interpersonal process where you dialogue with the offender about what happened. You exchange stories. You express hurt. You listen for remorse. You begin to reestablish trust. It's much more complicated. It moves beyond forgiveness to trust. Forgiveness is solo. Reconciliation is a joint venture. And that's what we're talking about in our gospel lesson. And I would say in Matthew writing this story, the early church valued reconciliation. And I believe our church, our nation, and our world need to value reconciliation also. It's hard work. You can't do it alone. There is another way. But God needs your hands. Amen.